Donald Trump destroying the absolute immunity that the Supreme Court corruptly gave him a few years back in that horrible decision, right? The absolute immunity that Trump is able to claim, although we all don't think he should have been able to have been given those powers by the Supreme Court, are things connected to his executive functions, even things that may be on the outer perimeter. But once they get past that outer perimeter, he doesn't have absolute immunity. You want me to tell you what's outside that outer perimeter? Easy. When he brings cases in his personal capacity, not as his official capacity, he's not acting in the executive branch. He's acting in his personal capacity. And when you look at some of the rulings that were made in those January 6th insurrection case that were brought against Donald Trump, the reason that those cases didn't get dismissed on absolute immunity grounds is because they were saying it was campaign functions. That wasn't you acting as the president of the United States. You were acting in a campaign function. So when Donald Trump sues for $10 billion personally and from the Trump organization and from Trump family members against the IRS and the Treasury Department, his very argument about why it is a case and controversy in the first place, although we know it's absolutely a collusive arrangement, has to be that I'm acting in my personal capacity. I'm brought in my personal capacity, not as the commander-in-chief, not as faithfully executing my Article 2 functions. And so now we all know that Judge Kathleen Williams, you saw the report that we previously did, is essentially launching an inquiry at the request of 35 retired federal judges who filed a Rule 60 motion to reopen the case into the collusive, fraudulent, improper, perhaps even, to give you my opinion, protected by the First Amendment, perhaps even criminal nature of what went down. And Donald Trump, in actions there too, he can claim, I'm the president of the United States. Well, that becomes an admission of the collusiveness and of the problem to begin with if you admit that. And obviously, he filed it in his individual capacity. And so what it is this is how I think it will be framed eventually, is that an individual, sure, he's also wears the hat as commander-in-chief, unfortunately, but in an individual capacity, entered into an agreement using the court as basically the getaway car to try to defraud the court to steal $1.8 billion from taxpayer money to push it to special interest of the individual Trump, not the president, because remember, he brought it as an individual, and then waive all of his tax liability that he has individually with a waiver of all audits and claims that could be brought against him. I want to bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Substack, and podcast, because Harry, I know we've been slicing and dicing and others have that decision, but to me, some broader implications here is that it's Trump organization. It's Trump the individual. It's Trump saying, me personally stepped in. And when you do that, what's he going to say? I'm too busy now as the president of the United States, so you can't depose me. You can't bring me in. Well, sorry. You didn't bring that as the president. You brought it January 2026 as Trump the individual, and any of the consequences that flow are Trump the individual. You're no different now than anybody else. And so this is, to me, just like, Harry, when the DC Circuit looked at those J6 cases and said, says you filed it as an individual in your campaign, not as the executive branch. It's the same thing here. And I think this is one, we should follow all of these, but this one's got legs in a way that others should have legs, but this one really, really does.
I mean, it's got it all, and it does have legs. I agree. And your basic point is very sound, Ben. Look, we all think that the Supreme Court gave Trump a get-out-of-jail-free card for everything. And God knows they gave him a very broad card. But remember, it's for official acts. And even if you kind of massage it a little, things on the perimeter, evidence for it. But remember what was happening when Trump won the election. It had gone back to Judge Chutkan, and and Jack Smith was giving, here's, 2/3 of my case that still survives because they're not Trump acting officially. He's making arguments, always does. Well, when I'm defaming E. Jean Carroll as president on the lawn, I'm acting as president. Or when I'm exhorting people from the ellipse to storm, to go to the Capitol, I'm acting as president. Here, no way. It's as you say, Donald Trump, the citizen, sued the IRS, and that is no way, no how Donald Trump as president, and it couldn't be as president. Okay, so what are the implications? You're totally right. Kathleen Williams, the judge, says, I think there may be fraud here. Fraud, fraud's a word and concept that's cross-cutting in the law. You see it for ethical sanctions before a court. You see it for civil claims. You see it for criminal claims. They each require something higher, but the basic idea, if she finds it, that you committed fraud, there's consequences potentially. Now, I don't see this, especially with this DOJ, resulting in criminal charges, but that's not because of the immunity case. And as you say, what if Trump is a party to a fraud, he doesn't get out of whatever those consequences might be because he happens to be commander in chief. This is, if anything, is him in his personal capacity. It's this. And remember, the Supreme Court held in the Bill Clinton v. Jones case, if it's a civil case, and people want to depose you and bring it, etc. If this becomes that sort of thing, he doesn't get out of it just because he's president. So again, fraud is fraud, depending on the context. But this is the paradigm for the sort of thing he can't play the get out of jail free card that the Supreme Court gave him in Trump versus USA. Now, the immediate focus of Judge Williams' order is his lawyers, whoever signed the piece of paper saying, I want to voluntarily dismiss. But obviously, Trump is very implicated there. And, he doesn't get to say, well, I'm number 47 or whatever, so you can't touch me. It's just not true.
With you that this DOJ that's covering up child sex trafficking rings in the Epstein files, they're not going to be doing anything. Todd Blanche makes Pam Bondi look like a profound justice of the highest caliber. She's a learned hand as a result. It's a weird law school reference, but seems great compared to Blanche, and they're both horrible. Let me be very, very clear. So ain't nothing happening under this DOJ. To me, the question then becomes, Trump gets wiped out in the midterms. Let's take this scenario. Trump continues to attack and cannibalize Republicans in the Senate and continues to rip the party apart day by day. The popularity paint the picture, gets even worse and worse as we head to the elections, which I think is a real picture of what's going to happen. We get to 2028. Everybody affiliated with Trump, the name tainted, whether it's Rubio or whether it's J.D. Vance or whoever. Next person comes in, there becomes a huge groundswell of support for accountability this time, not to make the same mistakes as Biden, not to make as Merrick Garland and be aggressive, not because you're partisan or weaponizing, but because this transcends that. This is clear cut stuff. This seems to me, there's so many other things that should be the issue, but this one seems to me the issue based on how judges bipartisan reacted, how the Senate bipartisan reacted. It's so easy and comprehensible and offends the basic notions of everything that this one seems to stand out amongst them. I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, well, look, I've said exactly that. It's got everything. It's really a straight out pirating of taxpayers' money. It's making us conspirators in this totally obnoxious idea that the January 6th insurrectionists were somehow peaceful patriots coming to a love-in. It's rank self-dealing. It's complete ignoring of Congress. It's the abuse of the courts. So Look, I think you're right when if the Dems take control of the House, you're going to have sort of fault lines in the party among people who are saying, leave this behind and look forward, and others who are saying, and your point is right, this is not just about retribution. The strongest argument will be, how can we have just seen this happen? Worst corruption, abuse in the history of the Republic, really. There must be accountability, but that'll be played out. But I've said it, and I said, not lightly, I did go to the I word pretty early. It's the worst thing, the most grievous thing for us, the biggest insult to the American people, save only the pardons. And the pardons are more than arguably are probably within his power. So this really stands out. There have been unbelievable abuses that people under all our noses of the emoluments clause and self-enrichment to the tune, some say, of billions of dollars. But even more than that, not just comprehensible, but so rank. I do think that the school of thought that holds there's got to be some accountability, they'll be pointing at just this and doing the remedy that the Constitution sets up for it, which is impeachment.
Everybody subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. It's called Talking Feds. So when this video ends, search Talking Feds. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. But let's get Harry over 1 million subscribers by you subscribing to Talking Feds. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben.
New Meidas merch. Head to store.MeidasTouch.com today and get yourself the best pro-democracy gear and show your support. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.